Greetings. The presentation is called Where Should We Direct Research into Prehistoric Britain? As ever, we are interested in the role Black people played in this prehistory. Now, I came across a book many years ago called Early Britain, and the author was Alfred J. Church. The book itself went through many editions. The one I have is the 1896 edition. And if we were to turn over the page and look what's there, I'm going to start from page 2 and we're going to get into page 3 of the book. And the author says, he has a section, Britain before the Romans. What does he say? The island was inhabited probably at this time and certainly afterwards when we reached a historical period by two races of men. Tacitus, writing about the end of the first century of our era, says that the physical character of the inhabitants of Britain differs much. One part of them, he speaks of these under the name of Silures, had dark complexions and for the most part curly hair. These he identified with the Iberians or inhabitants of Spain. The other part, he says, resembled the Gauls. They had red hair and were tall of stature. Now, if we analyze what Alfred J. Church has just told us, when the Romans came to Britain, there were two populations living here. One population was dark complexioned with curly hair, and the other population was presumably white with red hair. So who were these populations? I'm going to read on some more of what Alfred J. Church has. Caesar, of whom we shall hear more in the following chapters, writing about a century and a half before Tacitus, gives testimony to much the same effect, that the interior of Britain was inhabited by a race which considered itself to be indigenous, the seacoast by another people which, in search of adventure or booty, had crossed over from Belgic Gaul. This people, he tells us, still retained the names by which its various tribes were known on the mainland. So Caesar is telling us that there are, again, two populations, an indigenous population and the Gaul population. The Gauls are who we would today call the Celts. And the reason why they had the names that they held when they lived on the European mainland is because that's where they originated. On the European mainland, they came to Britain, and there were already people living here, the Silures, and the Silures, we've already been told, are dark complexioned and for the most part curly haired. So that raises some obvious questions. How dark? How curly? Is this a reference to Black people as we understand them today? Another thing that Alfred J. Church tells us is that this dark population looked like the Iberians, the people of Spain. But that's not the people of Spain today. That's the people of Spain 2,000, 3,000 years ago. A very different population. So you cannot imagine a modern Spaniard and think, oh, well, we're talking about modern Spaniards. We're not. We're talking about prehistoric populations of Spain. And the big question we still want to ask and answer is how dark and how curly? I came across another book called Prehistoric Remains of Caithness. And this book was written by Samuel Lang, who was an English MP. And it has an anthropological appendix called Notes on the Human Remains, written by a very learned anthropological professor, Thomas Huxley. And this book was published in 1896. So let's take a look at what's here. So I'm going to turn over the page, and I'm going to quote from page 62. It says, "Unknown ages may have elapsed in a state of savagery too dense and animal-like to leave records, until some fortunate impulse from without or improvement from within raised the race to the level where they buried their dead in kists and raised tumuli and dwellings, at first simple and humble, but by degrees more massive and complicated, until at length the stone civilization culminated in such national monuments and temples as the circles of Stonehenge and Stenness. So according to Samuel Lang, the people responsible were originally savages, and then those savages improved their culture to the point where they built a stone civilization in Britain. Monuments like Stonehenge, monuments like Stenness. On the same page, the same scholar Samuel Lang goes on to have a section called Type of Race. Who were the people who built this stone civilization? We read, "The valuable memoir which Professor Huxley has been kind enough to subjoin places the anatomical facts fully before the scientific world, and it only remains for me to add a few general remarks. It is a most important and interesting fact that in association with these very rude and primitive remains, a type of human race should have been discovered, so savage and degraded as to present more resemblance to the lowest Australian than to any historical European